Forgive me if I seem like I'm trying to stall and buy time. I am. Just go ahead and tell you instead of trying to cover it up. All right. Hebrews chapter number 12, and we'll begin in the 5th verse. Hebrews chapter 12, verse number 5, the Bible says, "And you have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him." And so the writer of Hebrews begins to paint the picture that God is as a father unto you and I, and that we are as his children. And as a important part of that relationship, the father chastens the son. He disciplines his children. That God, if you will, he whips them, he spanks them, he straightens them out, and he corrects them. Now I will say this, when God spanks one of his children, he's not doing it out of anger and he's not doing it out of wrath. If you and I have been born again, all of the wrath of God was put on Christ and absolved upon the cross of Calvary. When God looks at the believer, he no longer has 1 ounce of anger towards you and I. All that has been poured on Jesus. We are in the good graces of God on the behalf of the Lord Jesus Christ. So when God disciplines us, it's not because he's mad, it's because he loves us and he wants to correct us. For example, if I see one of my children running out there towards the road and they begin to head that way and I catch them and I grab them and I spank them, I'm not doing it because I'm mad at them. I'm doing it because I love them and I know that that road is going to hurt them if I let them get near to it. So I want them to understand, do not do that. It's not out of anger, it's out of compassion, and God chastens his children in the same way. Verse number 6 tells us that. It says, "For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth." So I don't know about that physical spanking. I'm not sure about that. Well, what does that word scourge mean? He says in verse 7, "If you endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye bastards and not sons." That word bastard simply means fatherless. And what God is saying is, if I am your father and you are my child, then I will discipline you, not because I'm angry at you, but because I love you. Verse 9, "Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? For they verily for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure, but he for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness." Now, why does God chasten his children? Is it for his good or our good? Our profit, right? Isn't that what it says? When I spank my kids, it's not because it makes me feel good to pour my anger out on them. It's because it's good for them as I try to get something inside of them out that is wrong, and I'm trying to correct them. Now, back to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 3, and I want you to look at the 13th verse. I want to give you a real-life illustration of what happens when we fail to chasten and correct our children. Today is Father's Day, and I meant to say more about it, and I will at the end of the service because we actually have gifts for all the fathers, and that was already supposed to be given out, but I completely missed that window now, so we'll do that afterwards. But we honor Father's Day today, and as we honor fathers, I think it's important that we instruct fathers. Now, I'll say this message is not just for daddies, it's for mamas as well. I think both mother and father have a role in disciplining and correcting a child and raising a child and teaching them right from wrong. That's mom and dad both. But there is something about whippings that come from daddy. They carry some weight, don't they? How many of y'all remember that when you were in those stages? It was one thing for my mom to get after me. It was something totally different for my dad to get after me. It would ruin my whole day. It would ruin my entire year. There's a weight that is carried with that. And I want to remind you today of what happens when we fail to correct our children. 1 Samuel chapter 3 and verse number 13, look what the Bible says. It says, "For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile." And he did what about it? He restrained them not. Here we have the case of a man by the name of Eli. Eli was the high priest in the nation of Israel at the time. Eli had 2 sons. Their names were Hophni and Phinehas. And those two boys were raised in the tabernacle. They were raised in the church. And since they were of the priestly lineage, all priests had to come out of the tribe of Levi. And these boys came out of that tribe, as did their daddy. So they were birthed into the priesthood. So they themselves were priests. They worked in the house of God. They worked in the tabernacle of God. And because of that, there was a standard and expectation that God had on how they were supposed to live. And these boys, we find out in the text, you're going to see it in a minute, but they didn't live right. They were degenerate. They were wicked. They were evil. They were ungodly. They were disobedient. They were rebellious. And for all of that, they were still working in the tabernacle. Well, guess who's in charge of the tabernacle during that time? The high priest, their father, Eli. And what we find out is that rather than Eli being the daddy he should have been, setting it straight, getting his house in order, disciplining his kids, straightening everything out, Eli just turned a blind eye and let it go. And because of that, God put a curse upon Eli's lineage. And God said, you have corrupted your lineage, you have not corrected your children, and therefore I am going to put a stop to your lineage because they are a corruption in my house. And I want you to understand that in society today, we've got loads of children who were never corrected. They were never chastised. Mom and daddy never taught them right from wrong. They wouldn't know a spanking. If they saw somebody else get one, they don't have a clue what any of that's about. And because of that, our society has corrupted because we have a bunch of children who are unguided and they have no idea what decency actually is. And that's exactly what went on in the tabernacle. And you're going to see just a little bit about that this morning. But I want you to notice what God told Eli in verse number 13. It says, his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. Now, what does that word restrain mean? It means to hold back something. It means to suppress it. It means to limit it. And so what this tells us is that God has an expectation of a father to limit, suppress, and hold back the evil and the wrongdoings of his children. He has been called and tasked with the idea of restraining them. And I'll say this, it goes beyond just fathers. This is mamas and daddies. Both of them are supposed to do it. But I will remind you of this simple fact. In this text, Eli is the one that is accountable. It says nothing about Hophni and Phinehas' mother. Eli is the one they come to. Let me just say this. Daddies, you are responsible for the condition of your home. You are responsible for the way that things happen in your home. You are responsible for restraining that child. We've got this idea in our culture today, well, they're just kids, just let them do whatever they want. You let them do whatever they want now, and they'll do whatever they want when they get older too, and then they better like what they do inside of a prison cell because that's where they're going to end up. There's this idea that a father is to hold the evil back in their child, suppress it, limit it. He's to restrain it. The problem in our culture today is we don't believe that parents have any responsibility for that whatsoever. We say, well, that's what the justice system does. The cops are supposed to restrain the evil in my children. Here's the problem with that. If they never respected mom and dad, when they get out there, they're not going to respect the cop either. They're not going to listen to them. They're not going to let them restrain them. Is it funny, or not funny, there's nothing funny about this, but is it interesting to you that the same people who are crushing in the windows on cop cars and throwing just stuff through windows and glass and rioting everywhere and everything else are the same people who did not have a mom and dad correct them? Is that coincidence to you? Some people believe the school system is supposed to be the one that's going to restrain the evil in their children. And they send them off to school and they expect the teacher to put up and deal with it. But listen to this, if they won't respect mom and dad at home, they have zero respect for a teacher when they get there either. And the teacher can't do nothing with them either. Some people think that the church is supposed to restrain the evil in their children. And they let their kids do whatever they want to do, and they say, well, that's up to the Sunday school teacher and the pastor and the other people in the church. They'll shape my kids and they'll make them what they ought to be. Listen to me. If they won't listen to you at home, they're not going to listen to me when they get inside here. They have to be taught to respect authority. And the first line of authority that God gives a child is a mom and a dad. I love my children, but I'm not here to be their best friend. I am here to be their corrector. I am here to guide them. I am here to nurture them. I am here to raise them. A child who's never been taught to respect the authority of the parents in the home will never respect anybody else either. The only hope that we have for raising a generation that has not lost their minds and has any sort of decency is parents who enact authority and discipline in the home, and they will do what Eli failed to do. They will restrain their children. Let me say this. I hear it all the time. I hear the older generation complain about the younger generation. Well, I don't know what's wrong with these kids today. They just don't, they ain't like we were, and they do this and they do that. You want to know what's wrong with them? It ain't their fault. It's the fact they didn't have a mom and daddy that took care of them like they were supposed to. Everybody always likes to pass the buck on to the children, the next generation, and say, well, I don't know what's wrong with them. I can tell you what's wrong with them. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod will drive it out of him. That's what Proverbs said. Them children never had nobody to love them enough to correct them and show them the right way to go, and now they are products of their raising. And we always look at the kids and say, what's wrong with them? Well, let me ask you this, what's wrong with mom and dad? Why did they never restrain them? Why didn't they ever teach them anything? Why didn't they ever lovingly correct their child? And according to the text, it all begins with the father. Here in this text, we find the destruction of some young men due to the negligence of their father who failed to restrain his children from wrongdoing. I can tell you now, as you probably have already gathered, this is not going to be politically correct. It's not going to be politically popular, but it will be biblical. I want you to go back to chapter number 2 of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter number 2, and I want you to see the son's condition. God just told Eli, he says, I'm going to judge you because you didn't restrain your children. They've made a mess out of everything, and you just let them do it. But I want you to see in chapter number 2 what kind of boys these kids were. Chapter 2, verse number 12. The Bible says in verse 12 of 1 Samuel 2, it says, now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant came while the flesh was in seething with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand, and he struck it into the pan or the kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh and to all the Israelites that came thither. Also they burnt the fat, and the priest's servant came and said to the men that sacrificed, give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth, then he would answer him, nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I'll take it by force. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. That's Eli's sons. That's the high priest of Israel. That's his boys. That's what he raised. You say, how could the high priest of Israel raise such rebellious, brutal boys? He just didn't restrain them. That's it. Can I remind you of this? He raised them in church. They were raised in the tabernacle. They served in the church. Listen to me, friends. Having your kids in church is the first step, and that's wonderful, and that's great. You ought to have them here, but just having them in church without discipline at the house ain't going to make them what they need to be. Hophni and Phinehas had all the church that you and I could ever ask for. They lived there. That was it. And yet they still turned out in this way. Notice the children's condition. Look at verse number 12. This is going to sound bad, but I'll explain it to you in a minute. Verse 12, we see the worthlessness of the sons. The worthlessness of the sons. Notice what verse 12 says. Now the sons of Eli were sons of what? You know what Belial means? It's a Hebrew word for worthless, without profit, no good. They were sons of Belial. As a matter of fact, Belial came to be known as an antonym for the word Satan. People would use Belial to refer to Satan himself. It is a demonic term. It is a word that describes evil and wickedness. It is a word that by its literal definition describes worthlessness. That's who these boys had become. They had a daddy who would not restrain them, and because of that, they had become worthless. Now, let me say this. I don't believe that anybody on the face of the earth is truly worthless, because every single one of them are formed in the image of God, and Christ paid the debt for every single one of them. Every child has inherent value, every single one of them. But I will say, when it comes to the context of society, there are some children who have been raised, and they are of no good. Their presence did no good for anybody around them. I would imagine that as they walked around town and everybody seen those boys of Eli's, they would look at them and say, man, them boys ain't good for nothing. All they ever do is cause trouble. They don't get anything done. They don't help nobody. They don't do anything. All they do is take up space. Is that not the condition of many of our children today? Me and my dad were talking about a boy just this week who was not disciplined as he was raised. He was not taught right from wrong, and now he's to the age where you can't do a thing in the world with him. Matter of fact, he's a total threat to his very parent. To the people who love him and take care of him, they can't even hold on to him because they're afraid he's going to hurt them. You want to know why? He was never restrained. He was never taught. He was never corrected. And now he's no good at a job. He's no good for society. He don't produce anything. He doesn't contribute anything. All he does is consume. You say, what's the problem? They've not been raised right. They've not been disciplined. They've not been restrained. And now because of that, they have nothing to offer anyone. We have raised a generation, a generation has raised themselves, and now they have no skill set. They have no decency. They have no etiquette. They have no decorum. They have no understanding. They have no wisdom. Their existence brings no value to the society that they find themselves in. Now listen to me. I'm not saying that they are worthless in nature, but what I am saying is when it comes to society, they contribute nothing. Sons of Belial, sons of worthlessness. You say, well, I want my kids to contribute to society. I want my kids to be beneficial to the people around them. Then you better restrain them. You better discipline them. Now, why is it that these boys were sons of Belial? Look at verse 12. The sons of Eli were sons of Belial. What's it say after that? They knew not the Lord. Now, they were raised in the tabernacle, right? So they seen a lot of religious things. They did a lot of religious things. Their daddy Eli was the high priest. They didn't have an option whether or not they were going to be in the tabernacle. And as a matter of fact, if you look over at chapter 1 of the same book in verse number 3, you find out that they were priests themselves. Look at the last line of verse 3, and it says the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. So these boys were priests. So they were raised in church. They served in the church. They were priests in the church. All those type things. And yet for all of that, what was the problem in verse 12? Still didn't know God. Parents, let me put a preeminent goal in your life right now. You may not be able to give your kids the house you would like for them to live in. You may not be able to give them a brand new car when they turn 16. You may not be able to give them all the financial advancements that you'd like to give them. But here's one chief goal. Make sure that your children know Christ. You say, well, I'm raising them in church. That's wonderful, but raising them in church ain't enough to fix it. They were raised in church. You need to get your children under the gospel of Christ and get them under the blood of Christ. That's what's going to make the difference. Your kids will never be everything God intended for them to be apart from the Lord Jesus Christ. They knew not the Lord. So the first problem is they didn't have Christ. The second problem is they didn't have any chastisement. Remember, 1 Samuel 3:13 said that their daddy restrained them not. Mom and Dad, you should have no greater goal in life than to get your children to Jesus. I'm glad you aim at getting them in church. That's part of it. But getting them in church is not the end goal. The end goal is getting them to Jesus. And that takes more than church attendance. That takes daily admonition and correction. That takes them seeing a mom and daddy sold out to Christ, that they're going to live it themselves Monday through Sunday. That every day they're going to watch mom and dad pursue the Lord. Every day they're going to watch mom and dad live for Him, make sacrifices to Him. Every day that they're going to be taught about who God is. They're going to be taught about what Christ has done for them. That's what it's going to take. And without that, they had become sons of Belial. So the worthlessness of the sons. But then notice in verse 13 through 15, the selfishness of the sons. Man, these were some selfish kids. Notice what verse 13 says. The priests, now who were the priests at this time? Hophni and Phinehas, right? And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant came while the flesh was in seething with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand. And he struck it into the pot, or the kettle, or the pan, or kettle, or cauldron, or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. There's your key word right there. Took for himself. So they did in Shiloh and to all the Israelites that came thither. Now, in the Old Testament, God reserved a part of the sacrifice for the priests. That was what they ate. That's what they lived off of. They got a part of the sacrifice when somebody brought it to the temple. But these boys were selfish, and they said that's not enough. So they developed a new plan. They said, tell you what, we're going to get this little instrument that's got 3 different hooks on it. Every time somebody brings a sacrifice and we put it down there in the pot, we're going to stick that claw in there and pull it up. And everything that we pull up out of that pot, it ain't God's, it ain't theirs, it ain't my daddy's, it's mine. Notice that word in verse number 14. It says, all that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for what? Himself. That's all he cared about. He didn't care about nobody but himself. The selfishness of the sons. Do we not have a generation of children that are like that? Don't care about nobody but themselves. They ain't worried about what nobody else has got going on. And the Bible said that this would be the plight of the last days. 1 Timothy 3:2, for men shall be lovers of their own selves. And that is the day and age that we live in. And we all like to point fingers at the kids and say, well, those kids are selfish. You want to know why they're selfish? They never had anybody teach them anything any different. They had a mom or a dad who was selfish. A mom and a dad, listen to this, a mom and a dad who will not spend time raising their kids is selfish. They're more willing to do what they want with their time, and they say, I ain't got time to invest in these children. I'm worried about me right now. And as them children grow up, they see selfish parents. What do you think they're going to become? Selfish. And we like to point fingers and say, man, this next generation, they're just a bunch of selfless kids. Well, where's the selfish mom and daddy? When are they going to take responsibility for something? It begins with you and I. If a child doesn't see selflessness modeled before them in their parents, then selfishness becomes the default. You know, the only way a child knows how to love someone else ahead of themselves, I want you to hear me clear on this. The only way they know how to love somebody else ahead of themselves is if they see their parent do that for them. There's a foundation of selflessness laid in a child as that child grows up and they watch a mother or a father who loves them sacrifice and give for the child themselves. They see what selflessness looks like. But you take a child who's left to himself and he never had a mama or a daddy who really cared about him. Never had anybody who sacrificed anything for him. They just said, get out of my hair, go play, do whatever you do. I ain't got time for you right now. That kid, all he saw was selfishness modeled in front of him. What do you think he's going to be? He has no other option. It's what he's been taught. On top of that, if the parent's not taking care of the child like they should, then what does the child have to do? The child's got to take care of themselves, right? There's a lot of kids that are that way right now. They're selfish. They don't look out for nobody else. And the reason being is because they didn't have a mom and daddy to look out for them. And their entire childhood was spent fending for themselves, fighting for themselves. And so when they get in adulthood, guess what they're doing? Fighting for themselves. They don't care about you. They're in survival mode because they've been there their whole life because they never had a mom and dad pick up something and help them and do what they needed to do. And we point at the children. We say it's their fault. No. Where's mom and dad? Where's mom and dad? Eli restrained him not. You say, well, this is heavy this morning. It is, but it's Bible. It's Bible. The worthlessness of the sons, the selfishness of the sons. And then get down here in verse number 16, we'll see the ruthlessness of the sons. I mean, these boys were brutal. Verse 16 says, if any man said unto him, remember, they were taking the fat off the sacrifices for themselves. And it said, if any man said unto him, let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth. In other words, they said, let me make sure God gets his part first, and then you can get whatever you want, Hophni and Phinehas. If anybody said that to them, what would they do? Verse 16, then he would answer him, nay, but thou shalt give it me now. And if not, what am I going to do? Take it by force. Violence. Brutality. They said, we are going to get what we want no matter what it costs. We don't care what we got to do to you. We're going to get what we're looking for. Is that not the plight of many of the young generation today? You say, how do kids end up in gangs and all that type of stuff? It's how they were raised. It's how they were taught. 99% of the people that end up in gangs and stuff like that did not have a father figure. And I'll say this, my hat goes off to the single mothers who daddy was not there and mama stepped up. And I will say this, mama, there's still hope for your babies if you're a single mother. You say, how do you know that? Look at Timothy. Timothy's daddy was a pagan, didn't worship God, didn't serve God or nothing else, and Timothy still turned out to be a fine young man. But you want to know what it's going to take? It's going to take a mama stepping up and disciplining them. Going to have to fill that role that daddy should have filled. And here these boys, they would do whatever they had to do to get what they wanted. That's the day we live in now. People will get what they want by any means necessary. They have no regard for human life. Mother will murder her own children just because she doesn't want to be inconvenienced. No care for human life. No regard for the value of other people. No regard for human worth. Just so long as I get what I want. That's these boys, isn't it? How'd they get there? Daddy didn't restrain them. He didn't teach them. He didn't train them. He didn't suppress it. Now, for all this worthlessness, selfishness, and ruthlessness, notice the Father's correction. And I'll probably finish up right here. This is going to be the bulk of the last bit of this. You're still in chapter number 2. Look at chapter number 2 and then flip down to verse 22. 1 Samuel 2 and verse 22. Now remember, the Bible said Eli didn't restrain him. Eli did something that he thought was restraining him, but it didn't do no good. Excuse me. Can I say there are a lot of parents today that are doing things that they call correction that doesn't do any good? They ain't really fixing nothing. They ain't changing nothing. They're not helping anything. 1 Samuel 2:22, it says, Now Eli was very old, and he heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, as if the boys couldn't get worse, right? Verse 23, And he said unto them, Why do you such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people to transgress. If one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man shall sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding what? They hearken not unto the voice of their father, because the Lord would slay them. We find here the father's correction. We talked about the son's condition. Worthless, selfish, brutal, ruthless. But now we see the father's correction. Number 1, in verse 22, we see that the father was told of their behavior, wasn't he? Verse 22, it says Eli was very old, and he did what? Heard all that his sons did unto all Israel. People were coming and telling Eli, Listen, Eli, your boys are out of control. They're causing issues. You can't do anything with them. Eli, your kids are terrible. And so people come and told Eli, and I'll say there's one thing Eli did that he did right. He didn't defend them. He didn't defend them. What most parents do today is if you say, hey, listen, your kids are out of control, they're not behaving themselves, they're doing this, they're doing that, the parent has to step up and defend the child and say, well, my kid wouldn't do that. My kid never does something like that. Let me help us all this morning. Your children are not perfect. They're not perfect. And if you can't let somebody tell you what your kids are doing wrong, you're setting them up for failure. Eli, as off as he was in disciplining his kid, he at least accepted when they were wrong. He was told of their behavior. You know, and this is a foundational issue right here, is people don't understand something about their children's nature. People think that their children are inherently good, and so if they're good, I can just let them go, and good will come out of it. No. The Bible says your children are not inherently good. Your children are inherently sinners, just like you are. We're making everybody happy today, aren't we? Psalm 51:5, David was a good man. And David said this about his own birth. He said, Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. David said, I was born a sinner from a child. You say, when do we become sinners? We don't become one, we are one. We're born that way. Psalm 58:3, the wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they be born, speaking lies. Soon as they come out the womb, they're not good and on their way to right doing. As soon as they are born, they are sinners on their way to wrongdoing. And if you don't turn them around, guess where they're going? The wrong way. Romans 3:10, you say, well, my kids are good kids. As it is written, there's none righteous, no, not one. Your kids are sinners just like mine. They're going to do wrong. So when somebody comes and says, hey, your children, if the teacher has to have a conference with you and they say, hey, look, your child, I can't handle him, don't cuss the teacher out. Maybe your kid really is out of control. Is it possible? Eli was told of their behavior. I can tell this is really popular today. Verse 23. Eli was told about their behavior, but then Eli talked to them about their behavior. Look at what verse 23 says. Eli hears how bad his kids are. Everybody's coming up to him like, man, we can't do nothing with Hophni and Phinehas. Verse 23, and what does Eli do? I can tell you what he didn't do. He didn't get the belt out. He said, I tell you what, I'll have a little talk with them. 23, he said unto them, why do you such things? For I hear of your evil doings by all this people. He said, nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people to transgress. If one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? So Eli has a little talk with his sons. And I'll say there are some right things Eli did about the talk. Number one, Eli confronted his son. Verse 23, it says, he said unto them, why do you such things? Eli wasn't just passive about it and said, okay, we'll deal with it, and then went home and never said a word to his kids about it. Eli went and talked to his sons, didn't he? He confronted them about what they were doing wrong. Not only did he confront his sons, but Eli condemned what his sons did. Look at verse 23. It says, he said unto them, why do you such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. What did he call their actions in verse 23? Evil, right? He said, you're wrong. That's wicked. That's evil. He says, boys, what are you doing? This is wrong. He's not saying, well, I know you're trying your best. He's being upfront with them. He's confronting them, and he's condemning what they did. He called their actions evil. He did not just sugarcoat it. Let's land a plane right there very quick as well. Parents, you need to teach your kids that when they do something wrong, it's not just wrong because you said so, but it's evil and it's sin in the eyes of God. You understand that when you got two siblings together and one of them hauls off and hits the other one in the face, it's not just bad because you're mom and dad. It's sin in the eyes of God. And your kids need to understand that. If your kids think something is wrong only because mom and dad said it was wrong, what do you think they're going to do when they get out of mom and dad's house? They're not under your authority anymore. But if they understand it's wrong because God said it's wrong, they're never out from under His authority. It's a principle that lasts. What I try to do with my kids is when they do something wrong, I tell them, this is wrong, you should not do this, and it is sin, and you need to go get that right with God after you get it right with your brother. Or you get it right with me or your mom or whatever the problem is. Whoever they did something wrong to, they need to understand that what they did is not just wrong, it's evil. You understand the difference? Verse 23, he said, I hear of your evil dealings. So Eli confronted them. Eli condemned what they did. And then Eli convicted his sons. Look at verse 24. He said, nay, my sons, it's no good report that I hear. And notice what he says. You make the Lord's people to transgress. Remember, the Bible said that people hated even offering anything to God anymore because these crooked boys were down there taking everything. They didn't even want to go down there. It's like not wanting to go in the gas station when you got to wade through all the thugs in front of the door. You don't even want to go in, right? They didn't even want to go down there because of what was happening. Verse 25, if one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Eli told his sons that what they were doing was sin in the eyes of God. But for all of this little talk that Eli had, he confronted them, he condemned what they did, he convicted them. Guess what? It did not correct them. Look at the end of verse number 25. Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto the voice of their father. You know what that means? It means the talk wasn't enough. Apparently, the conversation was not enough to persuade them and not enough to change them. And here's where I want to park and finish up this morning, and then I'll let you go. Parents, talking to your children does not always correct the problem. It takes more than let's just have a little conversation about it. Let's just talk about it now. Do you know that the Bible never prescribes talking as a means of correcting your child? Now, I will say this. You do need to tell them what they did wrong. And maybe you do try to talk to them about it. Here's what I do with my kids. I see them do something wrong. I tell them it's wrong. That's the first thing. That's wrong. And if they do it again, we're not having another talk. It's not time for another conversation. Now it's chastening. Now you're getting a whooping because you know it was wrong. I told you it was wrong. You decided to do it anyways. Now I must restrain you. You understand? The Bible never prescribes talking as the means of correcting a child. The Bible never prescribes, here's what a lot of parents like to do, they just yell at their kids. The Bible never prescribes yelling at your child as a means of correcting the child. The Bible never prescribes, this is going to be unpopular, time out as a means of correcting a child. I'm not against time out. I'll put my boys in it, but they're getting a spanking and then they're going in time out. The Bible never prescribes restrictions as a means of chastisement or restraining your child. You know what the Bible describes or prescribes? Whoopings. Whoopings. That's what it gives. So that's old-fashioned. Well, the Bible was written a long time ago, but the Word of God stands forever. It wasn't wrong then, and it ain't wrong now. I want you to read a couple of verses. You say, well, I don't know about spanking my kids. Look right here at Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22. You say, well, I think I'll just have a little talk with them. Well, how'd that work for Eli? It didn't, did it? Matter of fact, Eli talked to him, and apparently in God's eyes that wasn't restraining his child, because what did God say about Eli? He said, you did not restrain them, right? So apparently talking is not God's idea of straightening your kids out. Proverbs 22. I'm going to give you a couple of these and then I'll let you go. I appreciate your patience this morning. Proverbs 22:15. I'm going to give you some proof texts and then I'll let you go. Proverbs 22:15. The Bible said, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. You know, when a child does something foolish, it's not the kid's fault. They're just doing what they do. It's normal, right? Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. They can't help it. They're sinners just like you are. Can you help the fact that you have a sin nature and want to do stupid things? No. That child is just being who they are. It's just inside of them. And see, this is the fundamental misunderstanding. When we look at our kids and we think, man, the best person ever is underneath that little shell, inside that little body. No, there's a sinful heart in that body. We love that sinful heart and we got the same one, but there's foolishness in there. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. And so what does God expect the parent to do? Drive the foolishness out by the rod. Isn't that what it says? But the rod shall drive it far from him. First off, actually, no, let's move on. Look at Proverbs 23 now, and look at verse number 13. Now, I want to preface this while we're talking about this. Remember, when God spanks us as our Father, does He do it out of anger? If you ever go to spank your kids and you're mad, you're doing it wrong, and you need to stop until you chill out. It's not an anger thing. It's not, I'm frustrated with you, so I'm spanking you. But rather, it's you're cool, calm, collected, and you look your kids in the eye and say, I want you to know you're wrong. I love you, and because I love you, I'm not going to let you behave that way. I do that to my sons all the time. I'll look at, Canaan gets it the most, but I'll look at Canaan and I'll say, son, I love you, but I am not going to tolerate you to be this way. It's a means of correction. Proverbs 23 and verse number 13. The Bible said, withhold not correction from the child. This is a good one. For if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. God said, you're not going to kill him. They're okay. They'll be all right. Thou shalt beat him with the rod and shalt deliver his soul from hell. First off, in verse 13, notice the command. He said, withhold correction from the child. That's a command, right? God did not leave that up for debate. Withhold not correction from the child. He gives a command, but then he gives some comfort about it. He says in verse 13, if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. God says, listen to me, they're going to be all right. They're going to be okay. You're not hurting them, you're helping them. And then in verse 14, he speaks of correction. He said, thou shalt beat him with the rod and shalt deliver his soul from hell. There is a spiritual benefit that puts your children on the straight and narrow, out of the broad and the wide way that leads to destruction, and on the straight and narrow way that leads to life. It delivers them from the dangers of hell when you chasten and correct your children. A child that is uncorrected is a child that is on the road to hell and headed straight that way, because nobody will pick him up and turn him around and put him on the right path. Proverbs 29:15. Remember when we started, I said the camera didn't get turned on. That might have been a good thing at this point. Proverbs 29:15. The internet loves this kind of preaching these days. Proverbs 29:15. The Bible said the rod and reproof do what? You want a wise kid or a foolish child? Remember, foolishness is in his heart, but the rod drives it out, right? And it leaves him with wisdom. The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. Listen to that one right there. Moms, you say, well, I don't want to spank my kids. You know what happens if you don't? They bring you to shame. In Proverbs 29:17, correct thy son, and he shall give thee rest. Yea, he shall give delight unto thy soul. He gives you rest. And then I'm going to leave with this right here. People say, well, I don't want to spank my child. I love them too much. Well, let me ask you this. God spanks His children. Does He not love them? We started in Hebrews 12, where it says, for whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom He receiveth. If you're telling me it's unloving to spank your child, what you're saying is that God does not love us. And as a matter of fact, God said if you don't spank your children, you don't really love them. Look right here in Proverbs 13 and verse number 22. Proverbs 13:22. The Bible says, it is not Proverbs 13:22, it's 24. Proverbs 13:24. He that spareth his rod loves his son. Is that what it says? Now, I know this is against culture this morning. I know this doesn't go along with all the parenting strategies and the parenting videos you watch on YouTube and everything else, but are we going to believe God's word or not, is the question. He that spareth his rod does what? Hateth his son. If I love my children, what am I going to do? I'm going to correct them. I'm going to chasten them. I'm not going to yell at them. I'm not just going to have little talks with them. I'm going to chasten my children, not because I'm mad, not because I'm angry, but because I love them. Verse 24, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. I don't want to spank my kids. I love them too much. No, you don't love them enough. Here we are tasked with correcting our children. I want you to remember the verse we opened up with, 1 Samuel 3:13. You'll find that after this, I'm not going to read it for sake of time, but you'll find that after this, God pronounced a curse on the house of Eli because his lineage had gotten so far off that nothing could be done with them. God said, I'm going to cut your lineage off, Eli. And as a matter of fact, during the meanwhile, God is raising up a man named Samuel to replace that family because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And all of that comes down to this, 1 Samuel 3:13. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. I'm talking to moms and dads this morning, but particularly daddies. Listen, if you want your children to be what they need to be, if you want them to be anything for God, if you want them to be anything for society, if you want them to be anything for anybody, you're going to have to restrain your kids. And this goes against everything in the world today where we just let everything slide, we let everything go, we don't discipline everything, and we think that we're giving our kids the benefit by letting it go. You're not giving them the benefit. You're hurting them. You're not helping them, you're hurting them. You're setting them up for failure. And so we've been tasked to restrain our children. we'll leave it right there this morning. I appreciate you coming. You come do business with the Lord. Maybe you're a parent and you need guidance. Figure out, okay, Lord, how do I do this? You come pray. Maybe your kids are grown. You need to come pray for these people that are still raising children then. I welcome your prayers. Please, pray for me. Pray for my wife. Pray for Hunter and Lindsay raising young kids. Pray for Sister Sydney back here. Pray for Karen and Raphael, trying to raise these children, that God would help us to be what we need to be for them and to train them the right way. You come pray and do business with the Lord.